Alex, you did it again. Well done, my friend. Well done. Ha-ha! Well, that is a classic song. Most of you know it, I think. Now I'm going to give you a song that's a little bit less classic, but just as classy. Hold on a second. Let me see if I can give you another one here. Bum, 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 bum. This phone is moving really slow today. Really, really slow. Let's see. Almost got it. Here we go. All right. Give a good listen to this one. This is local talent that will soon be identified. Hold on.
You have an old machine, it's running kind of slow. Country vintage sewing will help to make it go. Scott will grease the gears and clean the bobbin race. Your old machine will be running at a brand new pace. Oh, Husqvarna, Bernina, Singer and White. Country vintage sewing will get it running right. Join our live stream and be part of our family. Your old machine runs better with Country Vintage Sewing. Ho, ho, ho. Happy sewing, everybody.
All right. Does anyone recognize that voice? Does anyone recognize that voice? Of course not, because in these live streams, all you hear is my voice. But that's a new voice I'm introducing to you, and it was a special present sent by email from a wonderful couple from the great state of Wisconsin. All right, that's all the clues you get. See if you can figure out who that is singing that song. I'll give it to you one more time if you couldn't get it all the way. Hold on.
You have an old machine, it's running kind of slow. Country vintage sewing will help to make it go. Scott will grease the gears and clean the bobbin race. Your old machine will be running at a brand new pace. Oh, Husqvarna, Bernina, Singer and White. Country vintage sewing will get it running right. Join our live stream and be part of our family. Your old machine runs better with Country Vintage Sewing. Ho, ho, ho. Happy sewing, everybody.
Yes, that is Tim. That is Tim singing right there. I thought he did a brilliant job in putting that song together. Don't you think he did a great job on that? I'm going to see if I can find a way of uploading it to YouTube, or not YouTube, Facebook. I'll see if I can upload it to Facebook as well. So thank you again to Tim and Teresa out of Thorpe, Wisconsin, for that special Christmas gift of time and talent. Time and talent is more valuable than anything that can have ribbons and bows and all that other stuff. Don't you agree? So what a thoughtful gift. So thanks again to you guys for doing that. So what we're going to focus on today is focusing on the Singer Featherweight 222K. Now, does anyone know, I'm just going to go ahead and close some of this stuff out. Does anyone know when this machine was introduced? I'll turn it this way a little bit so you can see it from the side too. When was this machine introduced? And some of you are privileged, like Susie, to have one of these, the 222K. They are really quite rare in the featherweight class. Quite rare. Quite rare. Yeah, Alex and I have been singing the Batman version of that song for a while, so Tim's is a welcome change for sure. Tim's is a welcome change. And Tim is giving a date. Now, just to clarify again, I'm talking about the Singer 222K, the Singer Featherweight convertible. the Singer Featherweight convertible that you can see right here that has that free arm function. And it would have come on the scene later than the ordinary featherweight that was introduced in the year that Tim quoted. So if anyone can come up with that year, let's see. I think Emma just posted something. 1953 to 1961. 1953. Tim is saying 1953 as well. And you are all correct. That's actually the first year that Singer added this extra little badge mark below that gave the class of the machine. That was 1953, and that was with the introduction of the Singer 222K. Prior to that, the Singers had this badge mark here, but they did not have the secondary badge mark below that gave the class of the machine. That came about in the same year as the Singer 222K, 1953. Now, let me ask you some other questions about the featherweight family, because the featherweight family, as Tim alluded to, came on the scene around 1933. And does anyone remember where that little featherweight was first introduced? Where was that featherweight first introduced? And if anyone wants to give the specific date, I will be incredibly impressed. And I'll tell you what, I'll send you something special if you reach out after the live stream, because giving the actual date that it rolled out, that's a big deal. That's a big deal. Chicago World's Fair is absolutely right. Tim just typed that into the live chat, and it was in 1933. But what was the month and day? Does anyone know the month and day that the featherweight, not this one, but the original featherweight, was introduced at that Chicago World's Fair? Do a little bit of Googling and see if you can find it. Do a little Googling. And while you're Googling that, I'm also going to give you the serial number of this queen of singers, as the Singer 222K is referred to, and then you can look up Susie's machine. So you can get the specific birth date of the machine that we're going to be working on today. And the serial number is, and if one of the leaders would be so kind as to type it in the live chat, that would be brilliant. It is E like Edward, P like Paul, 759718. And you're going to notice something when you see the birth date of Susie's machine that's worth celebrating. So again, it's EP 759718. EP 759718. And Tim is giving another date. He's saying that the featherweight would have been introduced at the Chicago World's Fair on October 3rd, 1933. That's really, really close, but that's not correct. That is not correct. The Chicago World's Fair took about 2 years to prepare that site, where approximately almost 50 million people visited during the event from 1933 to 1934. But it did not start in October. Singer wishes probably that it had started in October, because they were late to the dance. They were late to the dance because the featherweight was not first introduced by Singer until right around, let me see if I can find that date. According to our friends at the Featherweight Shop, and I don't give them a plug very often, but they've got some very good content on their website. And according to our friends at the Featherweight Shop out west, the featherweight first came on the scene, was introduced in a series of 10,000 machines on October 3rd, 1933. And that's the date that Tim gave us. October 3rd, 1933, Singer rolled out their first featherweight machines, and there were only 10,000 in that group. And it was made from, if you didn't know this, the featherweight was produced from 1933 until around 1969. So it was produced well beyond the 222K that they stopped producing right around 1961. But the Chicago World's Fair actually started earlier than October. It started on May 27th, 1933. May 27th, 1933. So that's where, when you look at the dates, May 27th, 1933, and you look at the date that Tim gave us, that was the introduction of the first group of featherweights in October. Singer didn't show up at the Chicago World's Fair until about 5 months after that Chicago World's Fair was already in motion. They actually showed up rather late to the dance, almost a half a year late to the dance, when that first group of featherweights was produced in October of 1933. And that World's Fair had started on May 27th, 1933. So I always give credit to Singer for being strategic in introducing such a great machine with a theme of Century of Progress. But they were actually about 5 months late in introducing it at that great event in Chicago. Again, an event that generated visitors of, well, I'll give you the specific number if someone wants to type it into the live chat. The specific number of visitors that visited that 1933 to 1934 Chicago World's Fair was 48,469,227. It would have been so cool if the visitors had been, instead of 227, 221, because then Singer could have said, aha, an omen about our featherweight 221. But it was 48,469,227. And think about the time of 1933. We didn't have all the technology and the travel luxuries that we have now to the degree that we do. And yet almost 50 million people traveled to Chicago to check that event out. And they came from around the world as well, which is super duper cool. Super duper cool. So I think I saw that Emma, did Emma get it? I think Emma got it. Susie's 222K was born on December 18th, 1959. December 18th, 1959. And it did come from a production group size of only, what was it, 2,500? Something like that. Let me see. See what, yeah, Emma typed it right there. 2,500 machines. And that's where, when you look at the 222K that was introduced again with this additional badge mark to identify the class of the machine in 1953, and it was produced until 1961, that's only 8 years of production. And in 8 years of production, they only made, depending on who you believe on the internet, they only made about 100,000. Let's give the benefit of the doubt to some of those folks that say they made 110,000 of these Singer 222Ks. Let's bump the number up by 10,000 just to see what happens. Well, if you bump it up by 10,000, that means that during that 8-year period, Singer only produced approximately 13,750 of these Queen of Singers every year. 13,750 every year over that 8-year period. 13,000 is like the size of an incredibly small Singer production group. So it gives you an idea of how complex these machines were to make with their tubular free arm design and the other features that came with this convertible machine. And that's ultimately what led to the demise of this Singer 222K. It was too expensive to make. It was too expensive to make based on what Singer could then turn around and sell this machine for. And so it was phased out right around 1961. But up until that point, they had made about 110,000 of them. Does anyone know where did they make these machines? Where were these machines made? And I hope it's not Great Britain. Ha ha! I hope it's not Great Britain, but that's exactly what it says on the pillar again, just like the other machine we looked at. Yeah, Emma is spot on. And Emma should know because Emma owns a 222K as well. You might remember that Bandit was in the workshop, and Bandit was in fact the very first 222K convertible that I ever had the privilege of working on in the old workshop in Oconto, Wisconsin. So that was quite an honor to have Emma send Bandit all the way from Florida up to Wisconsin. I'll tell you one thing, she wasn't nervous because she had seen the packing method that I use, and she employed some of those tactics in protecting Bandit, but she was still a little bit nervous. I mean, a lot of stuff can happen, between Florida and Wisconsin. But the good news is Bandit got there safely. He got an incredible spa day, and then he was returned safely to Emma. And Emma has used him several times and says, wow, he's back to life. He's peppy, steppy, happy, dappy, doody da, and all that kind of stuff. But Bandit is quite a beauty as well, just like Susie's. And I didn't ask Susie if Susie named her 222K or not. So Susie's in the live chat right now. She can jump in and indicate whether or not her machine has a name. If the machine does not have a name, let me encourage the family, let me encourage the audience to propose names for Susie's 222K. Okay, let's be bold, let's be brassy, and come up with some names for her machine if she hasn't already named this girl. She doesn't have a name, y'all. She does not have a name, so we got to come up with a name for Susie's Queen of Singers. Queen of Singers. All right, let me give you some more information. I love giving you info. I tried to do some good research yesterday and the day before, and I'll give you some other info as well. All right. So focusing back on the Chicago World's Fair, I've shared with you multiple times that it was named or coded or coined Century of Progress. The reason that it was named Century of Progress is because Chicago, the city that hosted it, was founded as an incorporated entity in 1833. In 1833, Chicago became incorporated, became a real city. And so 100 years later, in 1933, they wanted to come up with something that was catchy to point out the centennial birthday for the city of Chicago. So they came up with Century of Progress from 1833 with the founding of Chicago to 1933, as Tim pointed out, when the Chicago World's Fair kicked into motion right around May 27th, 1933. Again, almost 6 months before the initial featherweight ever landed at that World's Fair to be introduced in that Century of Progress theme. Now, what a lot of people don't know is there was also a second coining of that event that people don't know about. But when I dug into things, I found out. So if someone wants to capture this in the live chat, that would be really cool. What they said beyond Century of Progress, they said science finds, F-I-N-D-S, science finds, man adapts, industry applies. And I think I said that out of order. What they said is science finds, industry applies, man adapts. And that really is the wellspring of inventing or creating something like a Singer Featherweight, whether it's the original one that would have come on the scene in October of 1933, or this 222K that came on the scene many, many, many years later in 1953. But I think that's really kind of a catchy thing. Science finds, industry applies, man adapts. And all through history, not just from the founding of Chicago in 1833, but long after that, we continue to apply science in the medical field, in the manufacturing field. We apply science everywhere, don't we? It really is a big deal. And then industry will come up with the tools, or will tool or retool a factory so that we can create what somebody is conceived of. And then ultimately, humankind adapts to that new technology. I don't know about anybody else, but I buy a cell phone, and about a month after I buy that cell phone, the people tell me that it's already outdated. What is that about? It's already outdated. And so we continue to adapt, but sometimes with a little bit of a gnashing of teeth, because it just seems like science and technology never slow down. They're just constantly in motion. And I think that's what's great about being a vintage family like we are, because we can look back at vintage things like this and say they're unchanging. They're static in time. They're long lasting. They're everlasting almost, because they don't have to adapt. They don't have to change. They don't have to. They don't have to be reapplied by industry, because they've already made their mark. They've already made their mark. All right. What else can I tell you? La 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 la. So the Chicago, I'll just share this with you real quick. The Chicago World's Fair that came on the scene in 1933. I'll ask this in the form of a question. Does anyone know the Chicago World's Fair that preceded the 1933 one? What year was that? What year was the Chicago World's Fair before the epic 1933, where we first learned of the Singer Featherweight? If anyone knows that, that requires a little bit of sleuthing and a little bit of digging. A little bit of sleuthing and a little bit of digging. See if anyone can find that. And while you're sleuthing and digging to see if you can find out the Chicago World's Fair that preceded the 1933, I'll go ahead and put on a little bit more music for us. That was the wrong song. My phone is really technology. Maybe I need to replace this phone. This phone is really lagging a lot today. Really lagging. And I am looking at the live chat. It looks like Emma, if I'm reading that correctly, Emma put down 1893. And that's exactly correct. So Chicago hosted the World's Fair in 1893, and then they finally hosted it again in 1933. Most of you know that that's a real political thing. Every city around the world wants to be the host city or host country of the World's Fair, because it draws, like I said, even back in 1933, it drew almost what 50 million people, I think, or something like that. Yeah, a lot of folks showed up at that. Yeah, so 1893. The interesting thing about the way the 1893 lay of the land was set up is all the buildings were white, and so they called it White Alley. And it wasn't a racist thing. They just decided to paint all the buildings white, and they were very, very curvy type buildings. And then in 1933, they said, we're not going to do it the same way. We're going to have all of our buildings multiple colors. And instead of curvy, we're going to make them tall and angular. Tall and angular. So if you look at those two World's Fairs side by side, they look entirely different as far as the way Chicago decided to present that epic event. They look very, 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 very different. Very different. So 1893, 160 years apart. I had not done the math, but it looks like Emma did the math. That's a long time to wait to host another World's Fair, isn't it? It's a long time to wait. Now, some of you know that after a major event like a World's Fair, after a world event like a World's Fair, they've got to eventually tear this thing down, right? They've got to eventually tear the World's Fair down and reallocate that space for something else. Does anyone know what prompted, beyond the fact that they were going to tear it down anyway, what prompted the tearing down and the destroying of that World's Fair back in it would have been 1893, I believe. Yeah, it would have been 1893. So they were planning on tearing it down anyway, but something happened that prompted the tearing of that down. If anyone knows that, go ahead and type that in the live chat. And I'll tell you, it had something to do with disease control. Something to do with disease control. Something to do with disease control. Yep. Chicago fire is a great guess, but that wasn't. That was right around 1871. Chicago fire happened in 1871, and that would have been about 2 decades before Chicago hosted the World's Fair in 1893. So the fire wasn't directly the infamous Chicago fire was not directly responsible for destroying that location in the 1800s, but something else came on the scene. Yellow fever is a brilliant guess, Tim, but it was actually something else. It was another disease that came on the scene, and the first part of this disease means tiny, to give you a big clue. Yeah, smallpox. Emma nailed it. Smallpox came on the scene, and it prompted, because they were concerned about contamination, it prompted them to begin dismantling the Chicago World's Fair back in that time period. And then ultimately, not the Chicago fire, but another fire also occurred that destroyed the rest of that site back in the 1800s. But there was one building, and is one building, as I understand it, that's still standing in that general area where that Chicago World's Fair was hosted in 1893. Does anyone know what building that is that withstood destruction and smallpox and microfiber fire and everything. And it's still, I believe it's still standing today. That's what I discovered anyway. It's another building, and it's also co-located with fine arts. It's called the Palace of Fine Arts, but it's also got an original name that was indicative of that building back in 1893. Well, I'll give it to you then. I don't think anyone's coming up with it, so I'll just give it to you. It's the Museum of Science and Industry. The Museum of Science and Industry was a building that withstood the smaller fire that occurred at that site in the 1800s, and also the smallpox epidemic as well. And from my research, it appears that it's still a building that you can find in that general area where that Chicago World's Fair was held back in 1893. Now, most of you know that in 1893, the president of the United States was Grover Cleveland. Excuse me, Grover Cleveland. I've got Sesame Street in my mind too, I think. Grover Cleveland was the president of the United States in 1893 when Chicago hosted that huge event. Does anyone know any of the other famous people that were at that event? Any other famous people that were at that event in 1893? Any other famous people? Robert Lincoln. I'm not sure who that is, but that's a cool name. So some of the other, I'm going to turn this down a little bit. Ha, I hit the wrong button. Technology. Ah! There we go. So some of the other famous people that attended the Chicago World's Fair. Oh, there we go. Emma's on it. Emma's on it. Yeah, a number of the people that she named. Yep. So President Grover Cleveland, Mark Twain, Buffalo Bill, Sitting Bull, Scott Joplin, and then obviously the president that would have attended the event in 1933 would have been Franklin D. Roosevelt. If anyone knows anyone else famous that attended the World's Fair in 1933, go ahead and type that in the live chat. We're all about learning in the classroom, and that would be cool to hear. That would be cool to hear. Yeah, Emma's on fire today. She's jamming it. She's jamming it. Now, another question for you. I'll stop this real quick. Another question. We'll see if Emma gets this first, or we'll see if maybe Alex or Tim gets it first. And I'm saying that because Alex and Tim are Johnny on the spot. Matter of fact, if no one noticed it, Alex actually was the first in the classroom today. Actually got in the classroom before Susie, which is amazing. Amazing. But let's see if anyone gets this. When Chicago hosted the World's Fair in 1893, and then again in 1933, there were a number of household name products that would have been introduced at those Chicago World's Fairs. Does anyone remember some of those things that we enjoy, that we know by name, that would have been introduced at one of those two Chicago World's Fairs? I'll give you the first one. Because I used to love getting this stuff because there was always a prize inside. And I loved the peanuts. The peanuts were better than the popcorn that was in that little box. Cracker Jack popcorn. Cracker Jack popcorn was introduced in Chicago at the World's Fairs. What about any other items? Any other items? Oh, Will Rogers. Well done, Tim. Henry Ford. And you know what? That would make a lot of sense that Henry Ford would have been at the 1933 World's Fair, because when you look at the videos that they shot of that event, they had a number of Ford cars doing all kinds of cool racing around this racetrack that they had set up and doing all these cool moves, even turning over and flipping and stuff. It was really crazy. Really, really crazy. Oh, hello to our friend. I believe our friend is it Antonio? Antonio Rodaldo. Where's our friend from? Is it Sweden or is it Germany? I'm trying to remember. Alex is still drinking his coffee. I didn't have any coffee today. I had tea. Yeah, I think Antonio has been, let me see. Trying not to block the camera. Yeah, Antonio, I think has been here before. And but I don't remember where he's from. I don't remember. West Brazil, that's right. I was trying to remember it was Brazil because we just had a gentleman the last time from Germany. And now we've got the privilege of having Antonio back from Brazil. So if anyone speaks or writes Portuguese, go ahead and throw some of that knowledge at our friend Antonio. Although I think he's adept enough in English, he really doesn't need to pivot over to Portuguese. But maybe he will. Maybe he will. I don't know. So some of the other products, and I see some of them popping up. The Zipper Wrigley's chewing gum is all spot on. Northwest of Brazil. We also had Aunt Jemima. Most of you remember Aunt Jemima. The Ferris wheel. As a matter of fact, the Chicago World's Fair had one of the, I think at that time, had the biggest Ferris wheel in the world. Automatic dishwasher. And this will make some of you happy if you partake. Pabst Blue Ribbon. Pabst Blue Ribbon also was introduced at one of those two Chicago World's Fairs. So it really is, it's kind of the breadbasket of if you're an inventor and you want to be able to show your product to millions, tens of millions of people, and maybe get investor interest or find some other one that will jump on board and help you develop that product, almost like the equivalent of a Shark Tank today, that's the place to do it. If you can get your product in front of that audience at a World's Fair, even today, man, oh man, you can get a foot in the door and really, really run off fast and furious with getting that product developed. Let's see who else we have. So again, just to recap before I get into this servicing, which I know all of you are looking forward to, the machine that I'm going to be working on today is called the Singer 222K or the Singer Featherweight or the Singer Convertible. It's a Featherweight convertible. It was produced from 1953 until 1961. We also have been talking about the predecessor of this, the original Featherweight that would have been introduced at the Chicago World's Fair in 1933. And that was made in 1933 until around 1969. So it was in production for about 8 years longer, which is kind of an interesting correlation if you think about it. The Featherweight convertible was produced for 8 years, and then they continued to produce the original Featherweight 8 years after this one was decommissioned because it was too expensive to make. So I think that 8 year factor might be an easy way for you to remember some of those facts. 8 years in production, the original Featherweight was produced 8 additional years after this one was phased out around 1961. And the other thing I always like to point out, and I've done this numerous times, is if you own like Emma and Susie, and maybe others of you in the audience as well own one of these 222Ks. As I said near the beginning of the live stream, you've got incredible bragging rights because they produced this machine for 8 years. And in that 8-year period, they only made about 100 to 110,000 of these machines, which means they were making about 13,750 a year for those 8 years. When they were making the original featherweight that was introduced in 1933, they were making that at a rate of around 97,222. Now, that's an interesting correlation as well, isn't it? 97,222 featherweight original machines were being made every single year. And that was over a period of how many years? Someone do the math. If they were producing these from 1933 to 1969, the original featherweight, not this one, the original featherweight that would have been introduced at that Chicago World's Fair in 1933, how many years did they make that original featherweight? Someone do the math and punch it into the live chat. All right, give you a few seconds and I'm going to punch it in myself. So I'm going to keep us rolling here. Yeah, exactly right. If some of you don't know it, Emma works in healthcare as a pharmacist. And when she's working on doctor's orders and dosages and all that sort of stuff, she's got to be able to do math in her head like that. And so Emma is a calculator. If you want her to add up some numbers, just give them to her and she'll probably amaze you with getting the right numbers. She's absolutely right. So they produced the original featherweight for almost 4 decades, 36 years in production. And over that period of time, they made about 3.5 million featherweights, again, at a rate of around 97,222 a year. So if you think about it, every single year they were producing that featherweight, the original 221 from 1933 to 1969. They were making as many machines in 1 year of that original featherweight as they almost made in 8 years of producing the 222K. Think about that. 97, almost 100,000 machines a year, the featherweight original 221. That's how many machines they made of the 222K in 8 years in Kilbowie, Scotland. Not Great Britain, as the pillar indicates on these 222Ks. We got to give the Scottish credit, right? We got to give the Scottish credit. They made these machines painstakingly. And some of you might remember recently at a live stream, we had the privilege of meeting a gentleman that lives there, actually lives in the Kilbowie, Scotland area. He was in our live stream and he was telling us that some of those buildings still stand, but they were converted into like a business park. So if anyone has a chance to go to Scotland, check out that area around Kilbowie. See if you can identify any of those buildings that would have been shown in that original video that I've got on the landing page of the Cow Country YouTube channel. Many of you have seen that video. As a matter of fact, the gentleman from Kilbowie, Scotland said he had just watched that video and it was so relevant to him because he lives there. It was a way to flash back and see the way it looked back then in the 1800s. Really, really cool. Isn't that the great thing about our family? We've got family members and friends around the globe. Around the globe, our Cow Country family reaches all the way around the globe. And it's such a privilege when we can actually meet them in the live chat, right? So if you're in the shadows right now and you want to step into the light, step into the live chat, introduce yourself, tell us where you're from if you don't mind. Maybe you're from Japan. Maybe you're from Australia. Maybe you're from New Zealand. I don't know. But when you're ready, we'll be excited to welcome you and to say it's so great to have you as part of the family, right? All right. I think that's all my notes. I wrote down my little notes. I wanted to share some knowledge with you. That's kind of my opportunity to be the teacher And now I'm going to be stepping into a teacher fellow student role as we begin to dig into Susie's 222K. Yeah, all right. So produced in 1953 until 1961, already you can see I've taken some of the basic parts off of the machine in these trays. I've got the bobbin case out. I've got the little thumb screw that holds the extension bed on, presser foot screw, and then the screws that hold this cover on that goes over the feed dogs and also holds the race finger in place as well. And these screws, two of them are the same, and one of them is different. So as you're putting these back in, if you're not paying attention, and it's pretty obvious, I think, because the head of the screw is quite a bit bigger, but I'll just show you. The two on your left, I believe it is, are going to be the smaller ones, and then all the way to the right will be the larger screw. And the larger screw is going to go in the opening closest to the pillar. So the larger screw is going to go in here, and then the smaller screws go in there. And it seems like an obvious thing, but the threading is the same way. So I've had people that have contacted me asking me why their screw doesn't go all the way down. And I've said, well, which one do you have where? And all of a sudden they'll go, oh, I see what I did. I put it in the wrong slot. So sometimes we can get distracted, right? We can get distracted and we don't notice they're not all the same, because most of the time, a throat plate cover, a feed dog cover, all the screws are going to be identical. All the screws will be identical. Not on the Featherweight 222K, two small, one larger. So just make sure you put them in the right order. You'll figure it out if you don't eventually. All right. Well, the obvious thing about the Featherweight 222K is the free arm. Now, does anyone know what the dimensions of the free arm are? We talked a lot about on the dimensions of the free arm, say on the Husqvarna Swedish Beauties. We talk about the fact that if the free arm is too bulky, like some of the Kenmore machines, you can only use it for so many applications, and then it's too wide or too tall, and you can't fit it into that child's pant leg, or you can't fit it into that little wrist area on the clothing because it's too bulky. So if anyone knows the dimensions of this free arm on the 222K, go ahead and type it into the live chat. I'll give you a few seconds. Otherwise, I'll give you those dimensions so we can add that to the live chat, and you can pass that information on, because that's a big deal when it comes to free arm size as to whether or not it's going to be a practical use for, say, clothing that Alex and his wife are working on right now with preemie babies. If you're working on preemie clothing, you need an ultra small free arm to accommodate those clothing openings and gap points. You need a real small free arm. I've got no fingernails. This really fits snug. It fits very, very snug. It fits snug as a bug. Ha ha! At last. What an incredible fit that has on there. It's just really, you hardly even need this. You hardly even need it. All right, let me stop that music for a moment. Okay, so the dimensions, if you want to make note of the dimensions for the free arm, and I would love to tell you that I just pulled this on a thin air, but if you own a 222K, it's actually on page 8 of the manual. Page 8 of the manual tells you the actual dimensions. Now, I'm not going to say them. I'm going to let you type them in the live chat, and I'll show them to you. Let me just get it orientated correctly here. And those are the dimensions of the free arm on the 222K. So you can compare it to your free arm machine and see how it compares. Again, the smaller the better when it comes to free arms, right? The smaller the better. Again, if you've got a manual, you can see in the bottom corner there, it's on page 8 in your manual if you never noticed it. I've looked at these manuals numerous times and I didn't notice it. Yeah, there you go. So the dimensions of the free arm that are part of this tubular design on this Featherweight 222K are going to be 2 inches across, 1 7/8 height, and then 7.5 inches, 7.5 inches in circumference. So I don't have the dimensions of the Swedish Beauty right in front of me, but either a Swedish Beauty or an Elna, it would be interesting to measure those in the same way and see how they compare to the Featherweight 222K. See if they are comparative in size, bigger, smaller, whatever. So again, the dimensions of the free arm of the 222K, it's going to be 2 inches across. It's going to be 1 7/8 in height. And then it's going to be 7.5 inches in circumference. Okay? So if someone wants to add that to the live chat so we have that as a record, that would be great. That would be great. Again, it's on page 8 in the manual, page 8. So what we're looking at now is the bottom of that free arm that I just gave you the measurements of. If you've never serviced your Featherweight convertible before, by opening up the bottom of this, you've missed some crucial servicing points. So we're going to take that bolt out right now and see if we can take a look inside of there. Here's our bolt right there. And then just slide this straight out. Now all of a sudden we've opened up a bank of service opportunities in there. And you might be able to see if you look at it very closely, it looks like it's pretty tidy. And that's because I've already, about a month or so ago, I've already gone through here and serviced most of these points inside of this Featherweight 222K. Like this rocker arm here. We got some worm gears tucked away right behind here. You kind of look in there, you can see the worm gears kind of tucked inside of there. There they are right there. But we're going to resurface it again anyway and just kind of clean a couple of the areas up a little bit in this live stream. And I'll do it to some Christmas music. You're going to see me using a Dremel to do some polishing. And then I'll use a pinpoint syringe to lubricate some of the key lubrication points. We'll put on some fresh grease on the worm gears down here. And then we'll button this back up pretty quickly. The other thing I want to ask is, we've got a choice of 2 greases to use. They're both original. We've got the purple grease that I prepared for Teresa, and we've got the lime green grease that I prepared for Candido out in New York. So I'm going to let the audience vote on which grease we use. Do we use Teresa's grease, the purple one, or do we use Candido's grease, the green one? And I'll remind the leaders again, the leaders that are in the live stream right now, if you haven't contacted me yet to give me your preference as far as color, please do that. I don't think I've heard from Jenny, Christine, Bill, and I'm probably forgetting others. But go ahead and give me your colors. And now that Tim is part of the leadership team as well, he can either share the purple with his wife or he can designate his own color as well. And I'll do my best to recreate it. But this is the original pink grease. All I've done is I've added color to it because each one of our leaders, because of their skills, their talents, their experiences, they bring color to the family and knowledge. And so I wanted to recognize that by giving them their own grease with their favorite color. So we can either use purple Teresa or Candido green, lime green. I'll let you guys pick. All right. So I'm going to put on a little bit of Christmas music, and then I'll get at tidying this area up a little bit, and then we'll apply the grease that you all pick. All right, I'm going to pause that music for a second. And I know I kind of did that. In a way that hopefully you could see some of it, but you may not be able to see all of it. What you want to do always when you're working on any sewing machine, whether it's a 222K or otherwise, is you want to make note of what the rotation pieces are, what the pivot points are, and that will tell you those areas that either need grease or oil. So as I'm moving this, we can see the rocker arm moving back and forth. We can see the worm gears rotating, and it gives us an idea of those pivot points that need to be serviced and lubricated. That really is the easiest way to make sure that you don't miss something, is take some time to observe the machine and see what the machine is doing in its mechanical movements, so you can identify those areas that are going to need lubrication or grease. And then use the appropriate type of lubricant that's going to provide the best long-lasting protection. I'm not a big proponent of synthetic or silicone type things. I like the good old-fashioned stuff that they used on these machines when they were made at the factory, and that would have been in use at that time. Kerosene, crystal type sewing machine oils are the best to use. So I use a mixture of the two in this syringe so that it provides that rust protection with the kerosene, the long-lasting lubrication, and then also that crystal white is going to stay on those parts as well to provide the additional lubrication that they need, especially on these parts on the bottom that are kind of out of sight, out of mind. Not a lot of featherweight owners ever even take off the bottom of their machine. Many people that own 222Ks have never taken off that free arm cover on the bottom. And you can see all the different pivot points as I rotate the balance wheel, all the different pivot points that need to get that regular grease and regular attention. What we're going to do now is we're going to shift our focus from the bottom of the machine to the Raceway area itself. I showed this in another live stream, but I'll see if I can possibly show it again now. And that is how to rotate that gib out of the way so you can remove that inner hook system on the Raceway, and then you can service that properly. It's not a quick one and done. You've got to take a little bit of time to take it apart, and then we'll service that as well. And there's a lot of points in here when I service this off camera that I used my dental tool to get into those different spots where there might be some buildup around the screws that have to rotate with that pitman arm or the other mechanical parts to free those up. The oil will help, but you sometimes need to chip away at them, almost like a dentist using this for plaque removal on your teeth. So as you get in there, put on some magnifiers and focus on your own machine at all of those pivot points, all those rotation points, and go after that crud that's making that machine work much harder to move those parts in the sewing process. That'll make it a lot easier on the motor that we're going to be taking out of this machine in a little bit. And I'll show you some basic servicing on the motor as well. All right, let's rotate this. I'm going to try to think about the best angle to do this with. Maybe like this, huh? Let's see. I'm going to probably need two of these, won't I? Or I can put it underneath the free arm, kind of like that. So in this Raceway area, you've got a single set screw, just like on the Featherweight 222K. It's going to be right up there next to this little finger. We've got to loosen that screw and then rotate this gib sort of like this so that we can try to open this up and remove that hook system. The problem on the 222K is, unlike the 221 that has a little bit of an opening on the bottom to allow that gib to rotate down more fully, the 222K, because of the cylinder design of the free arm, did not include that little opening. So this tends to be a little bit trickier to open up because we can't rotate that gib quite to the range that we can on the other one, but it's got enough clearance. We should be able to open it up okay. I'm going to get one more little tape roll to see if I can raise it up a little bit higher. hopefully it doesn't tilt over. Doing my best to try to give you a view where you can see what we're doing, in case you missed that other live stream on servicing the 221, I believe it was. All right, so I'm going to work on trying to get that little screw out, and then we'll see if we can open this up. And I've already cleaned it once, but things get dirty pretty quick when you're operating them. So let me put on some more music, and I'll start working on this. And this is basic stuff, I think, but if you didn't know it, if you've got a smaller screwdriver like this and it's not a magnetic screwdriver, in other words, it doesn't have that blackened end where you can see it's set up to be magnetic, you can take a regular tray like these from Harbor Freight and run the screwdriver over it like so, and it will create a magnetic field on the end of that screwdriver. And I'm only doing that because when I remove this screw, I'm hoping that it will stick to this screwdriver and I won't have to try to chase it down with this magnet. And we'll put that right there just in case. There we go. It's always good to have a backup plan. So we've taken out that little screw now, and what we're going to try to do with rocking the balance wheel is we'll rotate down this little gib that holds that Raceway hook in place, and then we'll do a little bit of cleaning on that as well. It really is critical to do that, I would say, about, depending on the type of sewing you're doing, twice a year would not be a bad idea at all. All right, a little bit more music as I'm trying to open this up. All right. You probably were starting to sing and you're saying, wait, don't shut the music off. Don't shut the music off. So we've got this opened up now. We've taken out this this inner part of the hook gib system, and we're going to have to clean this up. We're going to have to clean the inside part up. This right here, this surface right here is where that thread in the sewing process is going to be moving. This is the brain center that I talk about. So it's so critical to keep this clean and tidy so that you can get the best stitch quality possible. And we could just jump right in and use kerosene. But let's say that I hadn't cleaned Susie's machine before. Then what I'm going to start with is I'm going to start with a rubbing alcohol. And I showed this to you in one of the other live streams. I'm using 90% rubbing alcohol. The percentage is the intensity of that rubbing alcohol. And any of our healthcare people that work with different solutions can explain that a lot better than I can, as far as what's the significance of rubbing alcohol that's rated at 70% versus 90%. I think it's just the amount of rubbing alcohol in it, right? It's probably the intensity, but I go with the strong stuff, and then I'll put it on a Q-tip swab. We'll swab both of these components of the Raceway, and then we'll work at putting it back together after we put some kerosene on it too. All right, so I'm going to continue it. A little bit more music. Oh, wow, that was fun. I lost part of it. The power of magnets. Yeah. All right, stay right there. Don't fall again. It's bad for you. It's really not bad. All right. So rubbing alcohol first, and keep it clear of the paint and the clear coat finishes. And whenever you're cleaning in the area of these two conjoined hooks, you may be able to see those hooks right if I go like this. We got the hooks right here. Once the camera focuses, there they are. So we've got these hooks right up here. Make sure as you're cleaning them that you're going the direction so you're not going against that hook and going against the point of it. So on this hook, go that way. On this hook, go this way. Oh, there we go. Like this, like this. Don't go like this against that one, or go like this against that one. Go this direction. Also get in the little, for lack of a better description, get in the little crotch area of where that gib rotates. That'll make that gib open up much, much more nicely without having to fight it, because you get caramelization that gets stuck in there, and then it acts like a glue, so that if you're taking apart this gib and hook system, it'll make it incredibly difficult to rotate this to get that inner hook assembly out. When you get it nice and clean like this, it rotates just like a dream. Rotates just like a dream. Now we're going to put kerosene on there. Kerosene and crystal white mix. Again, we're starting with rubbing alcohol, and then we're going to move into kerosene for cleaning this piece. Right around these edges, really look. Right around these edges, really look for that crud. You can go over it with a Q-tip swab and it won't come out, but when you use a dental tool like this and you come around these edges, you get all kinds of crud that's trapped on that inner little ridge area. So kind of drag that tool around, break it loose like this. Then what I do is I put a dab of rubbing alcohol on there. We'll swab it off and then we'll lube it up with some kerosene and crystal white sewing machine oil. And there's a narrow little track that you kind of rotate it into. I'm just trying to make sure that I get it seated in there properly. This is such an awkward angle to do this at. Bear with me just for a second. Used to having this facing me straight on, and it's a little bit tricky when you're coming at this angle. I'm trying to give you a camera angle that you can see what I'm doing, but it makes it more difficult to put this back into place also. All right, you. All right, rotate around, keep going, keep going, keep going. There we go. It's just a tiny, tiny little track. You've got to get it seated in there. It's not a matter of just popping it in. You've got to get it rotated into the track that's on the left side of the Raceway. And then you can begin the process of rotating that gib assembly back into place to hold that into position. There we go. Takes a little persistence sometimes, but we got that gib now as the retainer. And you can see now it rotates full circle freely. And this is going to be stationary in the sewing process. It's going to be held in place by that throat plate feed dog cover on top. So only the rear hook assembly is going to be moving. This will be in a fixed position, but it's got to be able to rotate without binding. And if you don't get it into that track just right, it's not going to rotate freely. You're going to be basically jamming the machine up. Now we'll add just a little bit extra oil around that hook assembly where it rotates. And now we're going to work on getting that little screw back into place again. Let's see, a little bit more music so I can calm the beast as I'm trying to get this little screw back in there. Let's see, that was Christmas 2. Let's try Christmas 1. So these are the little screws that hold that throat plate cover on. You look at it in relation to the screw we're going to be putting back in. All right, here we go. I think I'll play it safe and tilt this back just a little bit further. And then once I get it started, I'll go ahead and show you. Let's see if I have enough room. I don't know if I do or not. Yeah, we do. We got enough room. Well, as you might suspect, that is very, very tedious trying to get that tiny little screw set back into place. So I'm going to rotate this back down now. We've got that part of it done. So we've serviced the bottom of the free arm assembly. Let me back this up. We've serviced the bottom of the free arm assembly. We've also serviced the Raceway now as well. Now we're going to focus on trying to get the motor out so I can show you that part of it as well. I don't think I've shown the motor service on the Featherweight for quite a while. Let's see if we can get to that now. I'm also going to show you as I'm taking off this stop action clutch retainer clip. Notice that the little flanges are pointing out. You can see that this one is kind of flared out. That's flared a little bit out as well. That's so that when you turn the stop action in, it's going to push those in to engage the main shaft. I found them before where they have them put on like this, backwards, and then when they turn the stop action, it's binding, and then it also, you can never wind a bobbin with this because it's always engaged into these tracks for the main shaft right here. So when you put this on, when you take it off, make sure that you've got those pointing out away so that as you turn this, it's going to press these in to those little grooves that are adjacent to the main shaft and allow the machine to have locomotion, but also allow them to pop back out when you turn this the other way so that you can wind a bobbin. I know that seems real simple, but sometimes we can get tripped up by things that are simple. A little cosmetic pad like people will use to remove makeup and other things like that is a wonderful buffer to put between the outside of the pillar and when you're removing this bolt that holds that motor in place. If you don't have a little buffer there, it's very easy to inadvertently have the screwdriver next to the pillar and be rubbing it against there as you're turning it, not realizing it. Then all of a sudden you see that you've removed the clear coat, and maybe in worst case scenarios, you've actually taken some paint off or chipped it or scratched it in some way. So taking that extra second, just to put a little buffer in there when you're taking that out, it's going to keep that screwdriver from making contact with the side of your 222K pillar. And it only takes a second to do that. You could use some other material, but just so it's going to create that little protection. So I'm taking the balance wheel off now. And now in order to get this motor completely out and to get this belt out of the way, we've got to remove the screw that's in this pulley. Now, the tricky thing about the little screw that holds this pulley on the output pulley of the motor is that we're used to the pinch screws. We're used to little pinch screws where you turn them in a certain amount. There's usually a flat spot on the output pulley that you line up the hole with, and then that pinch screw is going to hold that little spot and keep this in a firm position on that output pulley. With the Featherweight 222K, which is even different than the Featherweight 221, that little bolt is going to go all the way through the shaft. And I've had people that contacted me and said, I ended up breaking this little pulley because on the 222Ks, they're made out of plastic. The ones on the regular way 221s are typically going to be an output pulley that's going to be a metal material. It's a lot more durable. When they were moving into 1953, they were looking at trying to reduce cost. especially on a real expensive model like the 222K. So they ended up changing from a metal output pulley to a plastic one. And to hold it more securely, instead of having a regular standard pinch screw, they ended up having a bolt that goes through the output pulley all the way through the output shaft. So the trick is make sure you get that all the way out so that you're not lifting it up a little bit and then you're trying to pry this off because you're going to break it, you're going to crack it. It's plastic, okay? All plastic. All right. So now we have to disconnect the motor. We have to disconnect the motor from this plug-in junction. The motor is going to be on zones 2 and 3. And as you know from most Singer sewing machines, zones 1 and 3, the yellow one and the red one, are going to be where you wire your light. So your motor is going to be on zones 2 and 3. And then, as you might suspect, your foot controller, when you plug it in, even though it's pre-wired, so your foot controller is going to look like this. It's going to be pre-wired, and the foot controller is going to be working off of zones 2 and 1. 2 and 1. So motor 2 and 3, light 1 and 3, and then when you plug the power source in with the foot controller attached, it's going to be interacting with zones 1 and 2. So when everything is said and done, you push the foot controller, it completes the circuit to drive the motor. But you've got to have them separated into those zones so that you've got that intermittent connection that's completed by pushing the plunger on that Bakelite foot controller. So we'll take all of these off because we want to service these contacts anyway. Make sure that they're clean and tidy. And then we'll take this motor out and we'll pop this motor open to see if we can look inside and check the condition of that. And you can see on the 222K, they got pretty fancy. It's not all black wires. They actually gave us a red wire to go with zone 3, which is labeled red. So if you get confused and you're like, what did Scott say? Well, you can figure out at least 2 of the 4 wires by connecting the red one to zone 3, which is red, and the yellow one to zone 1, which is labeled yellow. And then you've got to divide the other 2. The other 2 are going to be for your motor assembly. We get that off now, just about. And you notice on the bottom that there's a brass washer that's on the bottom. That's so when you compress this down, when you compress this down, that wire lead is not going to be having contact only with plastic. It's going to be completing that circuit nicely with brass, a brass fitting here, and then making a really solid contact. So when you take yours apart, if you don't have these little brass washers on there, go to your local hardware store with this piece of it, this plug-in junction, and fit some nice little brass washers to go on the bottom of here, so your leads will have a nice contact along with the post. Okay. Now we're going to see if we can slowly move this motor out of position, kind of thread it through here. Let's take it nice and easy because we have to get past those other leads. We got that out of the way now. So we've got our motor out of there now. Now we're going to actually have to open this motor. So I'm going to have to move Susie's Featherweight out of the way temporarily. But again, look at that output pulley. It's very, very different. We're going all the way through one end to the other. And that's where people have gotten anxious as they're trying to get this pulley off, not realizing that it's a delicate plastic. They get to a certain point, they loosen that screw up like they would on any other output pulley, and they're trying to get this. They think it's probably just stuck with varnishing or stuck with some sort of goop. They start prying on it a little bit, and they end up cracking this part of the feed off right there. They crack that little piece off right there. So always, I've got a good friend that works on sewing machines, and his father kind of raised him up like my dad raised me up, working with my hands. And my buddy always says, my dad taught me to make a thorough examination. So before you start prying on something, whacking on something, bending on something, always do a thorough examination, and then you'll notice right away that on the 222K goes all the way through the output shaft, and you got to take that little bolt completely out to get that output pulley off. Okay. All right. So now we're going to get this open. I'm going to move this little Featherweight. I should say Her Majesty the Queen. I'll move Her Majesty the Queen out of the way, and we'll take a look at this motor now. I got another project going on over here right now. You may be able to see it, and I'll be doing posts on Facebook eventually. But this base for this 128 Singer was incredibly loose on the joints. It was very brittle, so I had to do all kinds of extra porting on here to put extra wooden dowels at these critical points here to make this more durable. And then the customer did not want to use a knee controller, so I'm converting this to a foot-controlled version. I've done the same thing for other customers where they want to be able to do both. So in that case, you have to port a separate hole either here or on the side, and then you can run that second cord and connect to this inside of this assembly that kind of comes through here like that. But that's my project right now. I'm hoping to get this done over the weekend and be able to present this Singer 128, which, if you're not familiar with it, is a 3/4 size machine, just like the 99K and the Spartan that I recently showed to you. I'm reluctant to stretch this cord too far. I'll just kind of show you a little bit here. There it is, kind of tilted up. So hopefully this will be the next machine you see in a live stream type presentation. All right, a little bit of music. We're going to take out 2 bolts. The bolts are a little bit harder to see on this 222K motor. The motor is going to be set up with some recessed bolts. So you've got to go into this port right here, and you got to go into this port to get those bolts out so you can open this up, and then we can do a little bit deeper servicing on this motor. So we'll work on that, and we'll put on a little bit more music in the background. And that's going to be too wide on the blade. It's a real narrow little opening. We'll have to find a screwdriver that's got a little bit more narrow opening than this. That head's a little bit too big. It tends to be real snugly packed. The other thing, when you open this up, you want to make sure that you're watching for, on the end of either end of the commutator assembly, there's going to be washers that will allow this to be centered and balanced in this casing so that it spins freely. You want to really be watching for those washers so that you don't inadvertently drop one off, and then it's not gonna go back together freely like it should. We'll open that up as well. Let's see if we can work that. The commutator sometimes is a little bit tough to sneak by. I'll see if I'm able to get it out. You just have to watch out for those wires coming off of, you can see the wires right here coming off of the stators. These are your stators right here that are the initial launch point for the motor. If you take this assembly out, you got to be really careful as you're trying to wiggle it by those stators that you don't damage these wires. Kind of just gently work them out a little bit, and then maybe we'll be able to pull this all the way out. The other thing that I recommend doing, and I did not do it, is you usually want to remove the motor brushes before you crack the case. In this case, I can just remove them after the fact. Just kind of pull them down. Right over here, there's one of them. And here's the other. Generally a good idea to take those out first because we're going to have to clean those ports anyway. But look at this motor. It just gives you an idea of a carbon environment, which is really what's generated by the motor consuming these brushes. That carbon goes everywhere, and it quickly creates a mess inside of that motor. Quickly creates a mess. It's going to give us a little bit more wire to work with here. It's the only problem when they add this extra coating. It looks really cool, but it also makes it a little bit more difficult to get that motor taken apart. A little bit more difficult. All right, let's see if we can get that commutator out. See if I can work it past there. It looks like we only have 2 washers on this end. I'm going to take these off so we can keep track of them. Actually, I was wrong. There's only 1 washer on that end, closest to the commutator. Oh, nope. No, I'm not wrong. They were perfectly stuck together. 2 washers. It's amazing when they fuse together like that. You can look at it twice, even move it around. You can't tell that it's 2. You kind of spread it apart. And the one on the left is going to be just slightly larger. That's going to go closest in, and then this one will go on top of it like that. We'll go ahead and clean. We'll plan on cleaning these as well. And depending on the angle of those stators, they do have a little bit of flexibility because there's wire underneath that black coating. Sometimes you can gently apply a little bit of pressure to get that commutator assembly out, which is what I'm shooting for, if I can do it, because that really is a critical service point on the machine. Just really watch those wires that are connected to the stator. It's snug as a bug in there, isn't it? It's really quite snug as a bug. And I'm just checking on this end over here for any washers. It looks like we still have our washers on the output pulley. They can sometimes stick to the inside of here. So you want to make sure you check that to see if there's any sign of them getting stuck in there. And then right attached from these stators is what's called your stacked lamentations. That's this area right here. And that's where this assembly is going to be rotating in the process of operating the motor. And there's a lot of ways to clean this up. The only thing you have to be careful of is these are all individual panels that are pressed together. So you don't want to be too aggressive against these. It can actually cause little scar marks, little etch marks like you can see on here. Um, some of these are factory done to increase the spin. Some of them are actually scarring because uh, the plates have just gotten damaged. But you can imagine if you look at that stack, those are like a thousandths of an inch thick. How many there are in each row? It's just crazy. Plus, you have the wires coming off of the commutator right here that are coming into these stack lamentations that then feed into the stators. Or I should reverse that. The stators then feed into the stack lamentations that then feed into the commutator. That's the proper order. But look at my hand. Gives you an idea, right? And I'm keeping my hand on here because I don't want to lose these washers either on this output pulley side. Has anyone ever done this before? Broken down a motor and taken out the commutator assembly so you can thoroughly clean it? Just curious. Yeah, it's a little bit of a task. A little bit of a task, isn't it? But we're going to give it a go. The quickest thing, since we've been running about 2 hours and 9 minutes, it looks like. We've been running about 2 hours and 9 minutes. And I'm going to use CRC electronic cleaner to quickly clean off the stators, the inside stack lamentations. We'll do a little bit of polishing on them as well. And you can use kerosene inside of here as well for cleaning. Remember, I did that demonstration showing the flash points of kerosene, rubbing alcohol, CRC, etc. The flash point is incredibly high for kerosene. So you can always use kerosene for cleaning inside of a motor, and you don't need to be concerned. Whereas other chemicals that are out there on the market, you can use will have much lower flash points. And if there's residue when we reassemble this motor again to put it back together to test it to see that we have a working motor, you can have that stuff actually shoot flames out of there. And when you got a plastic casing like this, flames are not a good thing. So we'll see if we can clean this up a little bit, and then we'll use some polishing, Dremel brushes very carefully on this soft copper, this soft copper brass material that's over here on the commutator. And we'll flush this area out as well with some of that CRC chemical, which is electronic safe. I'm going to take these washers off as well. Looks like we have 2 washers on the output pulley side as well. We'll slide those off very carefully. And you notice you've got one that's made out of a polymer composition on the inside, but the outside that's going to be rubbing against this side where the output pulley comes is going to be metal. So just make sure when you put them back on, you put them on in the correct order with the metal one on the outside, because it's going to be pressed against this end of the casing. This end of the casing, sorry. This end of the casing. And it's going to be rubbing up against that that copper contact on the outside where the output pulley comes out. And it's got to have that metal to be able to stand up to the friction and the spin. So polymer inside, metal outside. All right, let's do a little tightening up on this, and then we'll get this motor put back together. Let's see here. That's right. Excuse me. That's a little bit of kerosene on there. A little bit of kerosene. Be real careful if you're using a tool like this. Be real careful if you're using a tool like this that you're not applying too much pressure. Remember, this copper is a very soft metal, and also you have these wires coming off of the commutator running into the stack lamentations. These are all wires right here, so you have to really watch what you're doing with this Dremel. Now we've done a good job of cleaning up the commutator. We've also, because these stack lamentations are a little bit more fragile, we've used a copper type Dremel brush to manually clean these up and tidy these up a little bit as well. And now we're going to flood this area through all of this copper wiring, flood it very carefully with a little bit of CRC. CRC is a very, very nice electronic cleaner, but it's also a great general cleaner. But you'll notice that I have safety goggles on, safety glasses, I should say. CRC is very, very dangerous to the orifices of your nose and your eyes. So if you're spraying this stuff, keep your mouth closed and put some eye protection on so that you don't get any of that CRC spray in any of your open orifices. Hopefully that makes sense. Yeah. You ought to see the crud rolling off of here. It's just crazy. It's even blacker in the bottom. All right, I'm going to pause that for a moment. So this assembly is in pretty good shape right now. We're going to clean up this output shaft a little bit on the end. The CRC did a really good job of flushing out all this little web work of wiring that's comprised of copper, and then these wire leads as well that run into the commutator. This gets packed out with carbon dust. And we all know that carbon dust, I talk about it with the foot controllers, carbon dust retains heat and it causes that foot controller or that motor to run much hotter. So by flooding this out with CRC, we've lowered the operating temperature of this motor dramatically, especially when it's tightly compacted into this plastic casing. It's much more difficult for that heat to escape. So this is a really good start. We'll do a little bit more cleanup. We'll focus on also cleaning the inside shaft area where this is going to be resting inside of there on the commutator side. This is going to be the output pulley side. I'm having to double check. So as it's in the motor like this is going to be spinning against a copper contact on the inside. We'll clean that up. We'll clean this up a little bit more. Then we're going to focus on the stack lamentations in here. We'll inspect the stators. The stators are these right here to make sure that there's no wires that are being exposed. This is a special wrap It's almost like a electrical tape, but a little bit better. And when they wrap these at the factory, they put 3 layers on here. But over time, it can become brittle because of the heat. So whenever you take a motor apart like this, you want to inspect the stators from all sides. I usually use a mirror similar to this, a mirror similar to this, which is real dirty right now. um, and I'll check the insides of those stators as well to make sure that we don't have any sign of any wires breaking down and that the material's in good shape. Susie's motor generally is in very, very good condition. Very, very good condition. And the wraps appear to all be intact. If the wraps are not intact, you can use a variety of different things. If there's like a little patch where it almost looks like it's getting kind of frayed a little bit, it's getting frayed, you can use a heat resistant silicone. It's called Black Magic. Or you can also use something like this inside of the motor safely. I've always told you in the past that um, electrical tape is a temporary fix. Well, that's absolutely true. Electrical tape is a temporary fix, but this is a liquid tape that Susie introduced me to. And this liquid tape is like liquefied electrical tape. And when you put it on, it dries very quickly and it creates a beautiful, solid crust that attaches really well to the stators. It attaches incredibly well to the stators. And so what you would do is you would gently go over these stators with a Q-tip swab and a little bit of rubbing alcohol just to get the extra dirt off of them. And then if you've got one area that's affected where you can see it's starting to break down and it's starting to loosen up, you could take some of this liquid tape or the heat resistant, oil resistant silicone that they sell. It's made by Permanex, if I remember correctly. Permanex makes some wonderful products. And you want to get the black stuff. It's called Black Magic. And it's designed to be resistant to heat and oil, which is exactly what you need inside of a motor casing like this. You don't want to use a generic silicone because it's not going to stand up against the heat and the oil. But the Black Magic stuff they sell at different retailers by Permanex is a brilliant thing, and you can apply it just like this. And it's even a little bit more long lasting than the electrical liquid tape. But in a pinch, this is wonderful stuff, and it dries a lot quicker than the Permanex product. So if you're on a little bit tighter of a schedule, if you're servicing a machine for a customer and you don't want to overlook something that needs attention, this is a wonderful product to use because of its drying time is a matter of minutes. Permanex is a matter of hours, even if you dry it with a torch or if you dry it with a hair dryer. So if you've never seen this stuff before, you're in the same boat that I was. I had never seen it before. And Susie had some of it on the shelf down here and explained, this is what I use. And I tried it on a machine and I thought, I like this stuff. But again, this is not going to be as permanent as the Permanex heat and oil resistant silicone. That's going to be a lot better. But in a pinch, this does an excellent job. You can put more than one layer of this on there, and it'll give a really good finished product to the stators. Okay. All right. Let's see here. And what I'm cleaning with that Dremel brass brush is I'm cleaning this right here where that output pulley is going to be going into. Make sure this is nice and clean so that there's no drag. There's no drag on the part of that pulley as it comes out the side of this motor and it's spinning up. Any crud or anything inside of there is going to create drag on that output pulley, and it's going to make that motor have to work that much harder. And again, the Featherweight motor is 0.4 amps. It's not a big meaty servo motor where if you've got a little bit of drag, it's not going to matter. Every little bit of drag that hits this motor, from the motor to the balance wheel to the main shaft down to the needle bar, is going to take away power and energy from this motor. And that's why on this channel you've seen the Featherweights so ridiculous amounts of leather and other heavy material loads, because when I go through a motor, there's like 30 plus service points on it. You hit every single one of them so you can eliminate the drag factor for that motor, and then you've got a motor that will deliver a featherweight motor that's serviced and optimized properly will perform better than a much larger motor, considerably better. It doesn't need to be a high amperage motor to deliver big results. And this is kerosene that I'm putting in here. It does an excellent job of providing a lasting lubrication well beyond what the Crystal White sewing machine oil or other similar sewing machine oils can do. When you're dealing with an output shaft area like this, you want to provide the highest level of protection to that soft metal that you can see right there. You got copper here, and it's going to be spinning up and generating a lot of heat. The kerosene will lower that operating temperature. It provides a lasting, slick, protective surface. And also, as you know, kerosene is a wonderful rust inhibitor as well. So to reduce the possibility of rust developing, like you've seen on some of the machines that I presented to you on this channel, you also protect that motor opening right here from potentially generating rust. But you can see with a little bit of effort what we've already gotten out of there. Just a little bit of effort. And that's such a critical space where that output pulley, this right here, is going to be coming out and spinning up at a crazy rate of speed. Now we've eliminated that drag factor, and this is going to be able to spin that much more freely. We've gotten all the carbon dust out of here. We've cleaned up the lamentations. We've cleaned up the commutator. And now we're going to focus on the inside of the stack lamentation stacks and make sure they're tidied up as well. We've already inspected the stators. The stators are good to go. I've given you some solutions. If you open up a motor, as you inevitably will, and you see damage to the stators, you know now the best solution is that Permanex. I think it's Black Magic. It's a silicone that is heat and oil resistant. They sell it at all the retailers, probably the auto stores as well. It's everywhere. So, all right. I'm going to show you something real quick. Give you an idea of the carbon factor inside of these motors. I don't know if you're going to be able to see it or not, but if you look right here on the bottom of that area I just polished up a little bit, you can see where it's white and then the rest of it is black. Wait a second. There you go. See that little white spot? That's where I've just cleaned off of some of that carbon dust. Some of that carbon dust, I've just gotten that off of the inside of those wrapped lamentations. That's all going to be creating heat buildup. It's also going to be creating drag and blocking the electrical field. So the more that carbon dust we can get out of there, and a lot of you might be saying, what about an air compressor? The problem with air compressors is, yeah, it'll blow some of the stuff out, but it also compacts it. When you're using air compressors, just like a lot of people will use canned air near their feed dogs, they'll take off the feed dog plate, they'll take some canned air, maybe a small air compressor, and they'll blow down and they'll get a lot of the lint out, but the other lint gets compacted into that raceway area. So I try to use an air compressor as a last resort on motors, especially because what you'll do is you'll end up driving that carbon dust even deeper and compacting it into the motor. So you're really kind of working against yourself, if that makes sense. So we're going to try to clean it up using a polishing tool, and then we'll use Q-tip swabs, and then we might give it a light burst of air. But remember, inside of here, you have a lot of copper contacts. Copper's a soft metal. If you've got an air compressor ratcheted way up to like 150 pounds per square inch, you can actually warp or you can damage those copper contacts. So if you're determined to use an air compressor, use your adjuster thing to turn it down to below 90 pounds per square inch. 90 pounds per square inch is going to be strong enough to push some of that dust out, but it's not going to damage or bend your soft metals that are into your motor, that are inside of your motor. I hope that makes sense. All right, so let's do some more cleaning on this, and then we'll try to get it reassembled at the wrap up of this live stream. I've shown you before to take apart upper tensions. I'm not going to do that, but I wanted to show you some other points on the 222K that are really essential to optimizing it. And I think it was Emma and someone else that told me that they went to a featherweight shop. There's a real nice gal. I think she's based in Texas, and she goes around the country teaching featherweight shops on servicing featherweights. But a lot of the things I'm showing you, she doesn't cover in that workshop. And so if you're in one of those workshops, you could even, not to be controversial, but you could even say to her, why don't we take the motors apart? Why don't we do this? Scott does that to the featherweights. And, maybe do it on the side. Don't do it in front of the whole audience. That wouldn't be cool. But I love teaching people things so that you can then go out and share it with everybody else. These aren't secrets that we keep in our family. These are things that we learn in our family. And then we take them out to all corners of the globe and say, have you ever done this to your featherweight motor before? You said it was sluggish. You said it doesn't spin up the way it did originally. And you will make people go nuts when you show them what a featherweight motor can do. 0.4 amps can be like a servo motor, can be like a servo motor when it comes to, I got a call coming in. I'm going to decline it because we're in the middle of a live stream. But when you're dealing with a featherweight motor, you'll be amazed at what power you can get out of it when it's serviced and restored properly. Okay, that's what I meant to say. All right. Now I'm going to focus on cleaning the inside plastic casing a little bit, kind of getting that extra carbon dust off of there. And then we'll move slowly towards putting this motor back together. Okay, so a little bit more cleaning up on the inside of the case. And then we'll begin the process of carefully putting this back together again. We got to tidy up the washers as well that are on the main shaft and the output shaft. And we'll reinspect the wires again. Make sure our wires are all secure. There's no fraying of the wires, that the coating is intact. Again, the coating is going to protect the inside wire from being exposed and also reduce heat. That's the whole purpose of the insulation around the wire, is to manage that heat factor when that electricity is running through it. So we always have to double check and triple check that that's good to go. And you can see right here, we've got our lubrication point on one side of the Featherweight motor. That again is not for oil, it's for grease. In a pinch, you could use kerosene, but it would have to be pure kerosene. I wouldn't use a mixture like I use with kerosene and sewing machine oil. You would use pure kerosene, 1 to 2 drops, if you don't, for some reason, have access to grease. But grease is something that's generally readily available, so I would recommend using that whenever possible. We'll use just a little bit of grease once we have the motor back together. We'll put a little bit of grease in both wells, some of Candido's lime green grease. And I usually use a syringe to do that with. I don't have one set up, so I'll see if I can use a smaller syringe to do that with. And when you're putting this piece back together, I'm going to polish this up a little bit more. When you're putting this back together, just remember it's easy to orientate this because your motor brushes are going to be running over your commutator. The motor brushes will be running over your commutator. So this will be facing where those ports are on either end. And this will be your output pulley for that plastic pulley to go on the outside, like so. All right, let me clean this up a little bit, and then we will get this put back together. And then we'll wrap this live stream up. It looks like we've been running about 2 hours and 40 some minutes, and we'll get this wrapped up pretty quick. And again, on the output pulley, you'll want to use kerosene. It's a great cleaning agent. It's also a lasting lubricant in a high friction area like this. All right, now we're going to tidy up our washers. This one right here is going to be a little bit more durable. So that's going to go on the outside. This one's going to be a polymer. It's not going to be as durable. That'll go on the inside. And we're just going to use some Windex to wipe them off and get that extra carbon dust off of there. You'll notice I'm dabbing it. I'm not rubbing it aggressively. These are fragile. And so you don't want to crack one or break it. So getting the dirt off, but we're doing it on a low pressure basis. All right, now we got to try to thread the needle again. Try to thread the needle and get this to fit back in there. I'm just going to take these other washers off just for a moment. Actually, they're sticking real well. Good. Again, watch the wires as you're threading it back into those stators. We're checking for rotation now. You can see the output pulley is here. Checking also for wire clearance as well. We'll pull that out a little bit more and just inspect it one more time. And you want to make sure that the stack lamentations are pushed all the way down as far as they'll go into this base part on the output pulley. We're working that wire back out so that we make room for the rest of the housing. Make sure we didn't drop any washers. All right, I'm going to pause it for a second. It's almost like a Rubik's Cube when you get to this point. There's such a tight tolerance on this case that this paper installation will sometimes get stuck on the edges. So you have to really slowly work it together. It's just a very patient process as you're getting it lined up. So um, it is what it is, right? It takes a while. So I'm going to slowly try to work it into place. And yeah, just wanted to explain that it's not a quick plug and play. We are so close. All the rest of it should be the difficult part, but putting something back together is like folding a map. Getting it back together so that it'll go back together with these tight tolerances tends to be the challenge. I probably need to take a break for just a second because if you continue to persist, you get a little bit anxious, and I'm going to let it rest for a second. And hopefully, you found this helpful so far as I've gone through these different phases and you've seen the motor come apart and go back together. Almost. I'm so close. Without that paper, it would be so much easier, but that's an important insulation paper. So we'll work through it. And all of you watching right now are saying, I am so glad that I am not sitting in Scott's chair right now as he's trying to get this motor to cooperate and go back together again. You're saying these live streams are great because he doesn't edit anything. Yeah, this insulation paper, it's makes it so much more difficult because it should be underneath this plate right here, and it keeps sliding out of position. I'm going to try to move it to the other end and see if we can win the battle that way, maybe. Such a tight tolerance on these. We are at 3 hours and 9 minutes. I'm going to give it a couple more minutes on camera to try to fit this casing back together. I've covered everything else that's essential to the servicing of this motor. This insulation paper is giving me a heck of a trouble right now, a heck of a challenge. And that's just the nature of when you're working with something that has incredibly tight tolerances and spaces. It makes it that much more challenging to fit it back into place, especially when you're under the stress of dealing with a camera. So I might have to resolve to say, once you put the casing back together, you're going to place these 2 bolts back in. Put these 2 bolts back in. And if you're using an electric drill, you're going to set it on a torque of 3. You don't want to make it too tight. Then you're going to put the brushes back in after you clean the brushes. Get the carbon dust off of the brushes as well. Check them for calibration like I've shown you. If they've gotten compressed a little bit, then stretch the springs out a little bit so you've got better return pressure with the brushes against the commutator. And then we'll reinstall it back in the machine. Maybe what I'll do is I'll do a part 2 after I've gotten this silly case back together off camera, and then I'll show you connecting it back up to the junction again, which you probably already have down pretty well. Like I said, 2 and 3 is going to be the motor. 1 and 3 is going to be the light. And then when you plug the power source in, 1 and 2 are going to be the foot controller. So sometimes you just need to say, it's not coming together right now. I've got to get off camera so that I'm not under the stress of being on camera. And then I'll slowly work this back into position. But it's just a matter of getting that insulating paper to fit into this casing. It's such a tight tolerance. The cover fits on very easily like that, but then this paper kind of gets in the way. And Singer has it on there just to insulate it a little bit better, but it's a pain in the neck to try to get it to slide back into this tight casing. So, at any rate, I hope all of you have found at least the cleaning steps and the service points helpful. I will wrap up the live stream in just a little bit. I'll finish this off camera, and then we'll follow up with this 222K at the next live stream, maybe right at the intro, and then I'll move into the 128. That's been a major wiring and a major base wood project. And yeah, and then you'll have those pieces to put in your toolbox. So that's it. I'm going to play a little bit more Christmas music, and then I'll battle this tight case with this insulation paper off camera. God bless. This will probably be our second to the last live stream this year. I'm going to do a live stream, I'm hoping on Tuesday, to wrap this up, and then also finish up with the 128. And then there probably won't be any live streams unless I've got something to show as far as Christmas lights or something like that. I'll try to tuck that in before the new year, and then we'll go from there. But Mike Rowe, that used to do dirty jobs, used to get it probably even dirtier than this, but carbon dust, it just sticks to everything. And I've taken you so far as to show you what to do to the what you can do to the motor to get it back to tip top, and and then you can kind of take it from there. We'll build those other pieces in, and then you'll have more knowledge you can share. Okay. But doggone Singer for putting that insulating paper in there. It really makes it a pain in the neck to get those two halves back together, especially on camera. So God bless everybody. Thanks to the leadership team. I'll finish this up off camera, and then we'll take a quick peek at this 222K at the next live stream. Uh, I'll I'll wait to wire it up. We'll do that on camera, and yeah, there you go. Oh, what fun! And thank you again to Tim as well for the great song that he did. He and Teresa did. I might as well play it one last time at the end of the live stream, and you can give it a quick listen. Okay? Where is it? Tim is in here somewhere. There he is.
You have an old machine, it's running kind of slow. Country vintage sewing will help to make it go. Scott will grease the gears and clean the bobbin race. Your old machine will be running at a brand new pace. Oh, Husqvarna, Bertina, Singer and White. Country vintage sewing will get it running right. Join our live stream and be part of our family. Your old machine runs better with Cow Country Vintage Sewing. Ho, ho, ho. Happy sewing, everybody.
All right. Well, thanks again to Tim and Teresa for that special Christmas gift. God bless everybody. Thanks again to the leaders for taking such great care of the family. And once we end the live stream, I will tame this featherweight motor. And then the next time we meet together on Tuesday, I'll show you the renewed power of this little petite powerhouse 0.4 amp motor. Okay, take care. And we'll put on a little bit more Christmas music as I wrap this up.